Dale Porfilio. I'm the president for the Insurance Research Council and also the chief insurance officer for the Insurance Information Institute. The document I'll be talking about today is from the Insurance Research Council, but happy to answer questions in both of my hats that I wear.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Welcome to the committee and proceed with your presentation.
Sounds good. So I'm going to start on page 2 of the document. It's a brief that we sent out in December of last year that happens to be very applicable for what you're here discussing today. So it starts from just talking about how do we define affordability of the personal auto insurance product. And we define it starting from what is the average expenditure per vehicle for a year, which is data from the NAIC. We divide that by the median household income, and we use that from the U.S. Census Bureau. So we're just trying to say, relative to what's coming into the home, what's flowing back out for the cost of insurance. And Louisiana on that metric is the highest in the country. That was true in this document, which was the latest we had was in 2020. We now do have data through 2022. We're anxiously waiting for when the NAIC releases 2023. The good news is that it did get slightly better, that ratio went down from 2.93% to 2.67%, but that still is the highest in the country. So you haven't lost the title of the least affordable personal auto insurance premiums. But where I really want to focus on is page 3, and I'll focus on the chart that's on the right, where we walk through multiple different drivers. Because at the end of the day, the price of insurance needs to reflect the losses. And so we're looking at what are the loss drivers. If you take loss out of the system, then you can talk about having a lower priced product. So starting from the top of these, and we've touched on some of these again from the commissioner's statements at the beginning, and I know there's a lot of conversation about frequency and severity. The first metric we do look at is accident frequency. So how often are cars hitting cars? And Louisiana on this trait is 16% higher than countrywide. So not a big difference from that standpoint, but it is 16% higher. So if it was $1,000 in one state, now it's $1,160 in Louisiana. The average cost to repair vehicles, a little bit higher here as well, 9% higher. So you put those two together and you've got an extra 25% higher they were having to pay for insurance in the state of Louisiana. But the third one is the one that's most concerning, and I think what I would recommend looking into are there legislative changes in how people do make claims and in this state. This is a ratio of looking at when cars hit cars, how often do people file for bodily injury claims? So how often are they saying, I've experienced physical damage to my body after having physical damage to my car? And countrywide, that ratio is 1 out of 4. So 25% of the time, the insurance industry does have a bodily injury claim after a property damage claim, cars hitting cars. In Louisiana, that ratio is twice that. It's basically 50%. So 2 out of 4 times, people are claiming injury. Why is that different in Louisiana than relative to any other state? That is the highest ratio in the country. So what is different about Louisiana that we're having that many more people claiming injury after auto accidents have cars hitting cars? So we're not talking about single accidents here, single car accidents, but multi-car accidents, cars hitting cars. So that is a significant difference to be investigated to say, why is that happening more often in this state than any other state in our country? So if you look at that next characteristic, the injury claim severity, that is a little bit lower. And I think it's in part because there's so many auto injury claims being made that some of them are smaller and that brings down the average. But that's a mere 16% below when the number of claims is twice as high. So that in total, you're still sending up significantly more cost that insurance companies are having to pay out to your consumers, and ultimately then has to be factored into the price. Medical utilization, dramatically higher as well. You're close to 50% higher than countrywide. So this is speaking to the number of times people are going and getting MRIs, going and visiting chiropractors, significantly more utilization after those higher quantity bodily injury claims are being made. So these things are connecting the dots to relate how they're all connected. And the next one there, attorney involvement. You have 24% more times that attorneys are involved in claims. The study that was in the APCA presentation was on commercial auto. I'll quote one from the Insurance Research Council on personal auto that shows that when you have similar type injuries occurring, that the payout from insurance companies is higher when attorneys are involved, but the actual amount that goes to the damaged party after you've paid for attorney fees is less. So on average, this is a countrywide number, but on average, when auto injuries happen, the consumer is actually getting less after attorney fees have been paid for comparable type injuries. So that raises the cost of insurance, decreases what your constituents are getting paid to help them be whole after an auto accident occurs. So that's why we are very concerned in the personal auto space for that attorney involvement, because it increases cost and decreases what the claimants are actually receiving. It was mentioned in the commissioner's discussion this morning about uninsured motorists. It is a note that Louisiana is right about countrywide for uninsured motorists, 14% of your consumers. And that did step up from 11% when the pandemic started, stepped up from 11 to 14%, and it's hovered right about 14. It hasn't come back down yet. But a study that we finished after the release of this document, we sent it out earlier in 2024, was on underinsured motorists. And unfortunately on that one, Louisiana stands out as the fourth worst in the country. On average, 15% of claims in the U.S. are underinsured, so the limit there was not sufficient to make the person whole. In Louisiana, that was in excess of 35%, so more than twice the countrywide average. So underinsurance certainly was a concerning point for your state when that report was put out. And again, that was fourth worst in the country. And then the other metric on this page, and then I'll pause, is claim litigation. And just when you compare the claim litigation, this is the number of claims that are having claims litigation involved, 2.3 relative to 0.9% countrywide. So well in excess of 2.5 times. The only state above that was Florida. And I know that's been mentioned earlier as an example of a state that wanted to make reform happen, and they did do that in 2023. So we'll see how that changes over time. But certainly a concern with how often litigation is involved in resolving claims. So all of this is just to go, when we look at research at the Insurance Research Council, we're trying to get down to what are the drivers of cost. At the end of the day, our insurance product is priced prospectively, saying we look at history to predict what we think is going to happen in the future. We have to look at the cost drivers to make that happen. And there's multiple areas here where Louisiana is dramatically above countrywide. And when you're looking for legislative solutions to try to reduce the losses, to try to make the product more affordable, the places where you stand out most dramatically different than countrywide is where I would start looking for solutions.